This is the Milo Beasley Show. This is the Milo Beasley Show. There's only one thing you need to know. This is the Milo Beasley Show. And now, here's your host, Milo Beasley.
And welcome to the Milo Beasley Show. Dude, I'm super excited for our next guest. I mean, you've known him from so many of his projects. By the way, before we get to our guest, I just have to say that prior to this, I was eating some Chinese food, some rice, and I got some in my throat, and I was fighting off choking to death for the past half hour. So if you see me pass out, it's fine. So with no further ado, please help me welcome. You've known him from his projects such as Tommy Boy, 50 First Dates, My Spy, Heels. Please help me welcome at this time, Peter Segal. How are you?
Good. I'm hoping you're not going to just gag and choke right during our conversation.
You know, this could be my crow.
Okay. All right.
You know, do you prefer Peter?
Pete is good.
Pete,
and it's
right.
Segal, not Segal.
Segal.
Yes.
Okay, so not like the kickboxer.
Not like the other guy who's the Jew in denial. Not me.
Pete Segal, almost like the bird, but not.
Correct.
Yeah. So how are you today, man?
I am just peachy keen Jim Dandy. Right after Thanksgiving, came back from Phoenix visiting my mom and big sis, and you know that's a drive that let me just say, I love electric cars. Okay, I love my wife's Tesla, but the fact that it adds 3 hours to the trip is not great. And
right.
Where you have to plug in, the nice thing is one of the places you plug in is Quartzsite, Arizona, where if you don't know where that is, it's a blip on the radar, but it's where they filmed Nomadland, Best Picture from last year. So That's exciting. And the Carl's Jr. I think Carl's Jr. has a deal with Tesla because every place that you plug in is in a Carl's Jr. parking lot. Yeah.
That's great marketing.
Needless information.
That is great marketing by Carl's Jr. Be like, oh, well, you know, you have to park here.
Exactly.
So I know a lot of my viewers here are huge fans of Heels. So I definitely want to talk about that right off the bat.
Sure.
Congratulations on a very successful first season.
Thank you.
When you got into this, were you actually a wrestling fan prior to working on Heels?
I was a wrestling fan. I mean, I am. Grew up with some of the big guys, Hulk and so forth. And then ironically, I started working with some of the big guys, from Dwayne Johnson to Goldberg, Stone Cold, the Great Khali, Batista.
Oh, right. Recently. Longest Yard had half the cast.
Yeah. Longest Yard is where I met, most of those guys. And, so I've been blessed to kind of peek into their world. I didn't really know what it was like behind the scenes, though. And when I got involved with this show, that's what really appealed to me. It was really sort of like a theater company and a family running it. And so you have the drama within the family, and then you have the drama at the company, with who gets more screen time, who gets to live or die or be champion or be thrown out and whatever. And that I thought was kind of cool, and that had not been done before.
Absolutely. It peeled back the curtain, so to speak, on, everyone at this point since 1995 gets it. It's an entertainment, thing. It's not really sports. It's sports entertainment. But did you, especially when shooting like some of the action scenes, did you find yourself at, find a challenge, to direct those scenes, to call action and cut at particular moments?
Absolutely. I've done a couple of sports films. Longest Yard, obviously, it was football. Grudge Match was boxing. And in all of them, you really try to find an authenticity. You're portraying something that people are very familiar with in those particular movies, that's about, actual, sporting events, not scripted.
Right.
But you still want it to look as good as possible. And, in football, you're competing against, 47 cameras on a given night, for a football game, a network football game. And, I only had 5 cameras. And so similarly for wrestling, I don't have the same number as WWE, but, I also don't want to cut to the back of someone's head because it's a stunt guy, and it becomes very cutty. I'd still like it to be, as involving and, again, authentic as possible. And going back to, something you said before, that it is scripted, yes, but as James Harrison said, who's former NFL Super Bowl champion, who's in our show, one of the cast members, hitting that mat, jumping off the top turnbuckle, that's you can call it scripted, but the pain of hitting the mat is real. The pain of, hitting the floor if you're thrown out of the ring is real. So yes, it's an art. It's an art form, but ask Stephen Amell when he fractured his spine, in the pilot episode, doing a stunt. It brings with it a lot of bruises.
It does. I have a broken nose, 2 broken ankles, a finger that doesn't go straight. So yes, 23 years now. It's definitely taken its toll.
Yeah.
So did you, when you heard about Heels, now you were not the first director signed onto this project, right?
No, the project had been around for a couple of years. Michael Waldron created it, and they hired a whole staff of writers and a director, and then they had trouble casting it, and so they put it on the shelf. And he went on to win an Emmy for Rick and Morty, and he went on. He started with Community, went on to Rick and Morty, and gained a lot of popularity there. Around that time was when he wrote Heels. I think he was in his mid-20s. And then he got super hot. He did Doctor Strange, and he's now, he became the showrunner for Loki, and now he's writing Star Wars. So, I mean, there's nobody, hotter than Michael Waldron right now. But so they put the show on the shelf. A couple years went by, and they finally decided to resuscitate it, revive it, and they cast Stephen Amell and Alexander Ludwig. And suddenly, it became hot again. They called Michael and said, "Okay, you want to come over and now we're ready to hatch this egg?" And he said, "Well, I can't. Now I'm running Loki." So then Michael Waldron brought in Mike O'Malley, who's a dear friend of mine. I've worked with Mike for over a decade. And so Mike asked me to come on board. And so at that point, everybody else had moved on to other projects. And Mike and I were, the new custodians of this project. And so we started about 2 years ago and just got our second season order.
That's great. Yeah, congratulations. I wanted to talk about that. So season 2, that's obviously a huge deal, especially, in a streaming environment.
Yeah, it's it is exactly. And we've been blessed with some pretty great reviews, some of the best of my career. And I think eventually, you never really know what ratings are in the streaming world. It's
Right.
not like the old days with Nielsen. You had 3 networks, maybe 4 if you include Fox. Now it's like, yes, Netflix can tell you whatever they want to tell you, how many people tune in, but you don't really know. Some other companies are very secretive about it. And so I don't really know how many. This is not really a streamer. It's on Starz, but it eventually becomes a streamer. You can get it on Hulu and all these other apps associated with Starz. But so we're happy to be here.
Is there anything, we'll maybe make this a multi-point part question. Is there anybody who you would like to see in the series? And is there any direction, any storylines that you would like to see happen in season 2?
Well, that I don't want to give away. Yes, a lot. And I've been talking to O'Malley about that. But no, we had CM Punk in last year, and he said to me that Pete, if this show takes off, you're going to have a lot more wrestlers wanting to be in the show than not. And so I talked last year to Batista if he wanted to do a cameo, and he said he'd love to. He was shooting in Australia, I believe, his HBO series. I'm just trying to get Batista locked down for next October to shoot My Spy 2. So, but if he has any extra time after that, yeah, he's going to come in and do something, I think.
Yes, that's another thing I want to talk about. My Spy. Is there going to be, the rumors on the internet are that it was open-ended? Will we see a My Spy 2?
Yes. Ironically, Amazon, going back to what I was talking about with ratings and how many people stream things, we asked, how will we know if My Spy 1 is successful or not? And they said, oh, we'll tell you. And I said, okay, you'll tell us, but how will the world know? Because that's how people judge success, box office, but there is no box office, when you're on a streamer. And then it came out in Forbes magazine that we were the third biggest movie of 2020. Now that has a lot to do with the pandemic,
right?
Families that were locked in their houses with their kids, there wasn't a lot to watch, and so it was Hamilton, Borat, and then My Spy. So I mean, go figure. But so yeah, they awarded us with a sequel, so we're going to start shooting that literally a year from now.
That's great. Now, again, you're working with wrestlers. Do you find any challenges with, wrestlers being actors, or do you consider that a plus because they've already really been on TV for a number of years before they, get behind a different type of camera?
Absolutely. I think it's a plus. I mean, again, going for that authenticity. If you ask, Phil, CM Punk, to do a promo, there's nobody better, that knows how to do that. And what goes into it. I would frequently, and Amell is a sort of amateur wrestler himself and had been in some matches just on his own for fun. And so I would frequently talk to those guys, as well as Luke Hawks, who is our wrestling coordinator and our stunt coordinator. But, what kind of move would you do in this situation? Where is the valet standing? How do you take the mic? Where do you put your wardrobe, after you get into the ring? Every detail. And so a real wrestler can tell you those things and can tell you if you're doing it right, doing it wrong. And I would just have no embarrassment saying, stop. Are we doing this? What's the best way to be doing this moment right here? And we'd constantly confer with them,
That's great. At what point when you were growing up, did you decide that you wanted to be in like the movie, television, industry?
Oh, I had no idea. No idea whatsoever. I thought I was going to be a journalist. So I studied journalism and English at USC. And then I tried walking onto the football team, and that only lasted about 6 weeks. And then when I got cut, I said, okay, now I have to get serious. And so I got an internship at local CBS and started just kind of working my way up, sports specials and kids specials and other things. And so when I got into that, I thought, oh, this actually seems pretty fun. I think as long as I can keep doing this, this is a direction I want to go.
That's awesome. And then your first feature film, Naked Gun 33 1/3. I mean, there are already 2 successful movies part of that, working with Leslie Nielsen, an icon. Was there any pressure doing that movie, or were you like, no, we're just going to go have fun and see what happens?
Hell yeah, there was a lot of pressure. I mean, I was 30 and I had no idea what I was doing. But again, going back, I was just, at Channel 2 doing a show that told you about things to do on the weekend. It was called Friday at Sunset. And, I was 24 at the time, and they asked me to do where's the best pizza in LA, a story on that. And I said, okay, can I kind of have some fun with it? And I said, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. No one's watching this anyway, so knock yourself out. So I did a black and white takeoff of Citizen Kane. And that led to another piece the following, a couple months later, which was the best pool halls in LA. And I did a takeoff of The Color of Money with Scorsese and started building up a reel. And that's what David Zucker saw, in addition to a couple of HBO specials, comedy specials that I did for Tom and Roseanne, that their friends were, Chris Farley, Jim Carrey, and Ben Stiller. And so that's what sort of started everything. But so by the time I'm 30, I'd never really done anything that scripted. A lot of them were sort of reality based. We're just kind of riffing. There'll be outlines for things, but not, with a legitimate script, especially a feature length script. And so that was completely new territory for me.
But I mean, obviously you have to work with legends in that. Did you just kind of feel like, I'm gonna let them go, or did you feel like that you had to? This was your first, film that you had to, show them that you were boss.
Well, okay, that's a sort of a loaded area. When I got on the set, I being so young, Leslie Nielsen was not the kindest to me, because he, I think, was upset with David Zucker for not doing the third installment. And David wanted to go on and do his first dramatic opus, Davy Crockett, which never actually happened. So I was left behind with an older gentleman who was not too happy that this young punk was, the boss, as you mentioned. Right. And so it wasn't about saying who's boss. It's just trying to earn his confidence and his respect so that I can lead the troops. And that took a couple of weeks of, definitely some headbutting until I think Sherry Lansing, the head of the studio, called him and said how much she was loving the dailies. And that made him relax, thinking, okay, maybe this young idiot does know what he's doing, even though I kind of didn't. And so, but that always, is the challenge of any set that you're on, is earning the respect, of the actors. And as my hair changed color from black to white, they realized that I had been doing this for a while. And so then they relaxed. But really, it is about the insecurity of the people that really, whose faces are on screen, and they want to know that they're going to be taken care of.
Were you a fan of that type of like slapstick, tongue-in-cheek comedy?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was a huge fan of the Zuckers. Airplane, one of the funniest movies of all time. The first two Naked Guns were unbelievable. So that's why, when I was up just for a meeting, I thought, what? And I didn't know, how to behave at a movie interview. So I'm like, do you offer suggestions? Is that blasphemous? Is script God, that what they wrote?
Right.
And it wasn't until like my fifth meeting where I decided to finally pitch a joke that I won the job.
That's awesome. And then after that, you went on to work for one of the most iconic cult classic movies of all time, Tommy Boy, working with David Spade and, of course, the late Chris Farley. That just, it seems like that was probably more fun than work.
No, it wasn't.
Oh,
it was. I had worked with Farley on the HBO special that I mentioned, and then a show called The Jackie Thomas Show, which was sort of a spin-off of Roseanne. And he was dealing with his addiction issues at the time. And right after that episode, he was taken to rehab by Tom and Roseanne. They were good friends of his, and they were looking out for him. When I finished Naked Gun, I heard that he was clean, sober, and there was a script that they were trying to, fit in before the SNL season started again. And it was called Billy the Third, a Midwestern. That was the original name. And I said, well, that's got to change because they're shooting Billy Madison right at the same time. And there was two Billy movies based on SNL characters, well, not characters, but SNL performers.
Right.
And So it was there was a title, there was a fade in and a fade out, and maybe 8 pages that we kept from the original draft.
Huh.
And so because the rest of it really wasn't there yet, or very good. And so we started over, and it felt a little bit like a newsroom, like we were just, writing and sending the copy to the set. And so it was an incredible amount of pressure because we didn't have a locked script. We started shooting with only half a script. So I would like to say it was a really fun, pleasant experience, but it was scary and really hard.
So how much of it was script and how much was improv?
Everything ended up being scripted. It's just that we were sort of laying out the train track in front of the locomotive every day, but there was track there. It wasn't like the train was running on dirt and improving.
Right.
It's just that we had to come up with it quickly.
It's kind of like wrestling. You have a beginning and an end, and you just have to fill in the middle.
Yep. And a little bit, ironically, like, an episode of Saturday Night Live where you start on Monday with a blank page and you better have 90 minutes worth of material by Saturday.
Right.
So I think that's why, Lorne Michaels was not fazed by the lack of a script or the script not being in good shape. He was just confident that you'll fix it, make it happen,
right,
make it into a hit.
Yeah. Just, turn.
No
yes.
problem. Yeah. It's easy.
Paint it gold, put it in the Smithsonian. So did that end up leading you to working with Adam Sandler? Those the Tommy Boy movie?
I think indirectly it did because Spade and Farley and Chris Rock and Sandler were all sort of office mates. They like shared. I think Sandler and Rock shared an office, and then Spade and Farley shared an office across the hall. So they became great friends. And so at some gatherings, I would bump into Sandler and got to know him through Farley and Spade. And then he was really nice. He called me after Nutty Professor came out and just said he was falling on the floor laughing. And around that time, anger management, there was, a talk of that happening possibly with Jack Nicholson. And so it sort of, pinballed off of that. But I think it all began with Farley introducing us.
That's great. Now, you said during the time that Farley was clean and sober during the shooting of Tommy Boy.
Yeah. Yes. He met with his priest every day. And one of my producers on the show just escorted him there. And that was his sort of AA, was talking to, a family, clergyman that kept him on the straight and narrow.
Did you ever find it, I don't want to say difficult, but did you ever get lost in the scene and just watching Farley, watching David Spade, and then forgetting that you were actually working?
Yeah, and it freaked Chris out because I have what's been called Joe Cocker face when I direct, and I just start kind of getting into their dialogue, kind of willing it, trying to Obi-Wan it into a performance that's in my head. And this one time I was right next to the camera and Chris is acting in the scene and he just comes out of character and says, "Oh my God, Pete, what's wrong?" And I realized I had to cover my face with, something just so that I wouldn't freak people out by like whatever weird contortions that I go through. Suppose I haven't stopped. It's just the way I am, but it's definitely.
So you still do this?
Oh yeah. But it freaked Chris out. Yeah. In a good way though.
Now for 50 First Dates, you was that filmed in Hawaii?
Yeah, it was originally supposed to take place in Seattle. And then Sandler said, "Why the hell do we want to go to Seattle?" Nothing against Seattle, but we could be in a warmer place with more sun. And I thought, okay. And it turned out to be, at first, I will admit, it was just a fun suggestion.
Right.
But it turned out to be a great note because the movie completely transformed with the location because it, forced us to cast the movie differently and we had to rewrite it, for the island. And it would not have been the same movie had it taken place in Seattle.
Oh yes. So then so You had to completely rewrite the movie then.
Yeah. Yeah.
So somewhere out there is a 51st Dates that takes place in Seattle.
Yeah, and it was the original title was 51st Kisses, but it didn't. The marketing folks at Sony thought that kisses would turn off guys. Oh, it's so we changed it to Dates, which I hated at first, but now it's the only name anyone knows, so it's fine.
Right. Now, how often do you try to persuade your actors to shoot, or the studios to shoot in Hawaii since then?
Well, it'll never happen again. I realized that was in the days when they spent a lot more on comedies. The budgets were huge. And then in 2008, when the stock market crashed, everything changed. And now, they're made for a fraction of what they used to be made for. So I don't see Hawaii in my future. Not really. Yeah.
I was there a couple of years ago, and Sandler and Spade were there filming. I think it was like The Wrong Misty.
The Wrong Misty. Yeah. Well,
yeah, The Wrong Misty. Yeah.
Netflix, you still get some healthy budgets, but elsewhere in the world, not so much.
Yeah. So, man, I gotta, just have Sandler call up a pro, whatever.
Yeah. I think that's the only way I would go back there is if he said, "Pete, let's go. We can afford it."
Now, I mean, you've got to work with a lot of great people. Like you said, Jack Nicholson. You got to work with Drew Barrymore, during 51st Dates. Have you ever really, when meeting one of these stars, been starstruck?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was working, my third movie was a comedy with Jack Lemmon and Lauren Bacall, and going up to them, I was absolutely speechless. They happened to be talking about working with John Ford, which talk about, could it be any more intimidating?
Right.
And, I had to just, wipe it out of my head. And I think my mother asked me that same question in the beginning of my career. And I said, for maybe a little moment, like just tuning in, a radio station, it finally, I see their face and all I see are all the characters that they played in their stellar Oscar-worthy careers. And then it snaps back to the work that needs to take place. And now you're just working together. And then you can go home and say, oh my God, I think I just directed so-and-so today. But there's so much pressure during the day to make your day. There's over 100 crew people there. And if you have extras, it could be hundreds more. And, there are bean counters there, just looking at their watches and making sure that you finish on time. And so you really don't have the luxury to say, oh my gosh, look who I'm working with.
Right. Have you ever worked with somebody who was at the beginning of their career who made it huge and you were like, I knew it. Oh
yeah. Michael Pena. I discovered him, ironically, on the movie with Jack Lemmon. And every now and then we bump into each other at a local Mexican restaurant here in my neighborhood. And he reminds me, it's like, yeah, you gave me my start. I'm like, that's kind of cool.
That's great. Now, if you were to pick up your phone right now and call somebody, who would be the most famous person that answered?
That would see my name.
Yes.
And then click, okay, I'm going to talk to this idiot.
Right.
It could be Batista because we're still, in business together. I think Sandler, is probably one of my, best star friends. He's a great friend, but he also happens to be a star. That's what I mean by that. So, but we communicate. Actually, you should ask that question to my wife because she's a dentist in Beverly Hills, and everybody who works with me ends up needing a dentist for whatever reason. They end up going to Linda, and now she is the dentist to the stars. She has more famous friends than I ever had.
So you are the Carl's Jr.
Yes.
So, or would you be the Tesla? No, you would be the Tesla that brings everyone to the Carl's Jr.
Yes. And by the way, the Tesla is her car, not mine. Okay. Yes. Just want to make that clear. So, yeah.
So yeah, I think here you would be the Tesla that brings everyone to the Carl's Jr. So your wife is the Carl's Jr. It's
Yeah, I'm trying to follow that, but sure.
I'm trying to go some now, and you know, I don't know if it has been a fortune or I don't want to say detriment, but you've had the the pleasure, I assume, of doing remakes, Get Smart, Longest Yard. Is there pressure in doing those, or are you just like, I'm just going to do things my way and we're going to have a successful product?
Well, Longest Yard definitely was a remake. Get Smart, it's more an adaptation because it had never
Right.
been made into a movie. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure, from the original fans. You usually do a little bit better when the movies are old enough that the fans have died of old age. Then who's gonna compare? But the critics will always keep you in tow. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure, but after a while, you just have to say, "Hey, this is our version. This is my telling of this story." And what I would say is, Hamlet has been done thousands of times, and no one says, "Oh, that again." They go, "Okay, well, look, what's this interpretation of Romeo and Juliet, etc." And I think certain stories, and I think that's what is the task for a studio to determine what stories are worth a retelling. And by the way, we're about to experience one with the West Side Story. So, I mean, I'm sure Steven Spielberg is feeling the pressure of that.
Right. Yeah. And you got to give it to Rita Moreno, who starred in, film or in the Broadway, and is doing this film adaptation. I'm super looking forward to that, to watch her performance as
Me
well.
too.
Is there anything, like a West Side Story that you would like to, maybe that's been on stage, or a television show that you would like to see done as a movie, either you working on it or just something in general?
For a number of years, I was trying to get the Jetsons made into a movie, but couldn't crack that one. It was different regimes at Warner Brothers that understood it and got it, and others. I remember one time, head of the studio said, the 60s was not a very big era, and we don't really want to make a movie about the 60s. I'm like, it's not about the 60s. I mean, there's certain architecture that was inspired by that era that they then put in the future. But anyway, it's always a big debate. I think one day it may get made, but that's just one.
I'm on your side. If the Flintstones can get made,
yeah,
then I'm on your side here.
I agree.
Who would be a good? I mean, so to me, a George Jetson, the first person that comes to mind would be Steve Martin.
Yeah. I mean, Steve is getting older now. I mean, if he's gonna have Elroy and Judy, he's got to be more in his mid to late 30s.
This is true.
Steve is in his upper 70s. But so yeah, look, it's so many people can play it, and I've talked to so many people over the years about playing it, and now they're all too old. So whoever's hot, but I think that, to me, the star of that movie is the movie itself. So you can almost have no names in it, and I think, in my opinion, it would be successful.
Do you prefer working with no name actors and watching the project blossom, or do you prefer working with stars and using that to help push and elevate the project?
Both. I mean, sometimes people who have not worked that much in the business or very young are just willing to do whatever, and that's great. But at the end of the day, it is a business, and you want to put butts in seats, and you want to have people's eyes on what you're doing. And sometimes the best way to do that is with who you cast, and the biggest star usually gets, that opportunity to have the biggest number of people, tune in. And that's really, at the end of the day, what it's about.
Is there somebody who you haven't been able to work with that you would love to work with?
Still working on it. Still working on it,
Okay.
you know. I mean, there's so many people that are fantastic that I would love an opportunity to work with, and you know, I'm just like that hamster on the little wheel. I just keep running every day, and I go, oh, there's a star up there. Oh, I'd like to work with her, or I'd like to work with him. Anyway, it'll happen one day. I'm just keep spinning.
You mentioned, projects like My Spy that was done, or not done, but was released during, quarantine, during shutdown, during the pandemic. What did you watch during the shutdown? What did you watch during the time at home?
I think one of the first things I binged was Ozark because I was behind. And my wife and daughter had watched the whole thing and they kept saying, you got to catch up. And I'm like, well, what season are you on? And they're like, they were done and I hadn't even started. And so this just means I'm going to be alone in the TV room by myself. And that's kind of depressing, watching a depressing show. But I got hooked. And I think that's the first thing I remember watching. Yeah.
Have you, I have to talk about this with everyone. It's the show that I try to push on everyone, but have you watched Ted Lasso?
Of course.
I think it's possibly the single greatest television show in a very, very long time.
Yeah, no, I very much enjoy it. And that's another one that I was behind on and I had to catch up. See, I haven't caught up with Squid Game, but I will. But that's the other one. Yep, it's a good one.
But they make it so easy now with streaming, and it's not like, I guess Disney Plus still does it where you have to wait week to week, where you're like, oh, it's a Wednesday night. Oh, we have to wait till next Wednesday, the old television days.
Well, that's a little bit that way. Apple does that with Ted Lasso. And
right.
My daughter is a producer on a show called Schmigadoon for Lorne Michaels. That's also on Apple. And I like the way that they dole them out so that you have to wait, till the following week. It does remind me of sort of the good old days of television,
right.
where you build up, a want, to see the next episode rather than it's just like, a smorgasbord and it's like all you can eat, after a while, just like, stop me. I'm going to just keep watching till 3 a.m.
Right. Next thing you know, it's the next day, the sun's coming up and you're like, oh, well.
Yeah. And then it's depressing. You smell, you haven't eaten, your dogs are looking at you funny. Like, we thought we were lazy. Look at you, you fat piece of whatever. Yeah.
One thing I want to do now is a little mini game here we do on the Milo Beasley Show. It is called the Milo Beasley Show Frequently Asked Questions. I'm going to ask you the same 5 questions that I asked to all my guests here on the Milo Beasley Show. There's no wrong answers. It's just first thing that pops into your head. Are you ready?
Yes.
Question number 1. Who is your first celebrity crush?
Okay, now this is very specific and weird, but she played Chip's wife in My 3 Sons, and then she was in an episode of Flipper, and I had this fantasy that we got in a sleeping bag together and hugged. That's before puberty, so that's what I thought sex was, just hugging in a sleeping bag. The girl from Flipper. Next.
That's I can definitely say I've never had that one before. That's a really good answer.
Yeah.
All right, question number 2. What is your guilty pleasure song?
I don't know if you'd call it guilty, but I'm just like a Ray Charles, I Got a Woman. It's like, but that I wouldn't feel guilty playing that. So it would have to be an annoying song.
Yes.
An annoying song. Well, I'll go with then the Carpenters, the one from Tommy Boy, which I'm blanking on the name.
All right. This next one is would you rather, if your life depended on it, would you rather fight a horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
A horse-sized duck. I would go with 100 tiny horses rather than a giant duck. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like one giant, like duck mouth. I don't know if you've ever seen the inside of a duck's mouth,
No.
but I would not like to see a giant one.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
I was once attacked by a goose, and it felt large. So anything bigger than what I was already attacked by would be frightening. Yeah.
Our fourth question. This one's going to be very interesting. You can choose one that you worked on or not. But what is your favorite movie quote?
Favorite movie quote? Leave the gun, take the cannolis.
What is that's on? I'm picturing it.
Please say you know what I'm talking about. Please, Milo.
I'm picturing
Godfather.
But okay, I wasn't sure if it was Godfather or if it was like one of the other like Casino or one of those. So it was Godfather.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was like, for some reason I was thinking Casino. I don't know why, but then but I'm glad I didn't say that.
Godfather.
And then question number 5. It's a fill in the blank. If blank was an Olympic sport, I would win a gold medal.
Oh God. Yeah, I don't know what your audience is. I could go super dark here. I'm just going to say farting.
Like we'll get into it. Are you saying like smell or sound? Like big,
Catch me at a certain hour, and it basically the horn to release all the slaves from Egypt to cross out into the desert and the 10 Commandments. I can rival that sucker. There you go. Class act right here. Didn't think you were going to get that from all of my classy comedies. So you get a classy answer like that. Yeah.
I mean, that is super. Keeping it classy here on the Milo Beasley Show.
Classy. Why not?
And our next game is called the Milo Beasley Show frequently, or the top 5, Milo Beasley Show top 5, where I'm going to ask you a random question, no particular order. Top 5 Adam Sandler movies that you haven't worked on.
Top 5 Adam Sandler movies. I have to name 5 of them?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Wedding Singer. What's the Safdie brothers one from last year? Uncut Gems.
Yes, Uncut Gems. Yeah, that thing won a ton of awards.
I liked Spanglish. And I'm gonna go Big Daddy. Am I up to like 4?
4, I think. Yeah, 4.
Okay.
Big Daddy's so good.
Yeah, and then Billy Madison.
So, what is next for you? Is your next project My Spy 2, or you have something before that?
We've got Heels, second season
Okay.
of Heels, and then right after that is My Spy 2. There's another couple of projects flirting, but those are the ones that are sort of locked and loaded.
Now, with something like Heels, where you're shooting, let's say one of the ones in front of a crowd. Obviously, shooting takes a long time. Filming takes a long time. How do you keep, whether it's an audience, whether it's extras, how do you keep them engaged and up and ready between, from take to take for this long day, so that way they are still up and cheering and loud for your cameras?
Good question. I like to take the mic, get in the ring, and explain to the crowd what the scene is about, because the extras, are incredibly important to the energy of what goes on in the ring, to the authenticity of the whole event. When I get into editing, I don't want to have people yawning, when I have crowd reaction shots. I want them looking like they're engaged, and really, if it's supposed to be shock and awe, that they're portraying that. If it's totally rabid, fan that, they're rooting for a particular person, I want it to look like they really are, not just going, yay. And so I really try to describe, what is the point of the scene. And there are a lot of times where I really have to, explain a whole arc and range of emotions, and then just, hope that they kick in. And I have to say, we had a great group of extras for heels that ironically was the same group every time we used them, because they all had to go through COVID testing.
Right.
So it was really hard to bring in outside people. We had this group of the max we were allowed to use, even though the dome, held 750 people. The max, safety wise, that we were allowed to have in the room at the same time was 150. The rest we had to do with visual effects, where we doubled them and put them in different parts of the arena. But it was usually those same 150 that would show up, to the tailgate scenes and the actual wrestling matches and other scenes that needed, large groups of extras. You'd see those same people. And if you, recognize, a certain guy with a ponytail a lot, you go, well, it's a small town. They show up at a lot of these events. But I would explain things to them, and I'd really try to, treat them like, participants and not just, objects. And like I said, you get out of those extras what you put in. And so the more you include them, the better.
That's awesome. How long does it take to film? Obviously, television is different. How long does it take to film a season of like heels, where you would be using these same extras and same actors and everything?
Well, we get last year was 11 days to shoot a 1 hour episode. This year, we may be only getting 10. And so you don't shoot on the weekend. So it's usually, a 2-week process.
Right.
That whole process was elongated last year because of COVID. And there were a lot of days that we had to shut down because of false positive tests or actual positive tests or injury. And so the season grew last year. Hopefully we won't experience any of that this year. Fantastic.
Well, thank you for joining me today. Before we go, where can folks find you on the social medias if they want to follow you?
They can just look up my name, Pete Segal. Follow me on Twitter or Instagram.
You're pretty active on the socials?
Instagram, yes. Not as much on Twitter.
All right. And again, thank you so much for hanging out with me on this morning. Hopefully you're having a good holiday. I think we're in the second day. Yes. So hopefully you're having a good holiday. So again, thank you for taking the time, and thank you all for taking the time to watch this on the YouTubes, listen on the podcast. If you see me this weekend at C2E2, please say hello. And again, thank you for joining, and we will see you guys next week. Where's my outro?